With great data comes even greater access latency. Welcome to the Presto Community Broadcast, where we transform your latency woes into fast insights. My name is Brian Olson. I'm your co-host.
And I'm that other co-host, Manfred Moser.
Presto Community Broadcast is a show where we cover events and happenings within the open source Presto community and show off a little cool stuff about Presto. So basically, this episode, we're going to be jumping into release 344, right? Not 345 yet, quite.
Not quite yet. It's just about to hit the road, I think.
Okay. Today, tomorrow, who knows? stay,
Yeah.
stay tuned for that. We're gonna again, since last week we had a little bit of audio troubles. We're gonna let Manfred cover his SQL at any scale training. Cover a couple different news insights and the typical what's coming up and events that are coming up. Then we're going to jump into the concept of the week. This will be done by Manfred this week. It's going to be talking about SPI, connectors, kind of a lot of the central juice to what makes Presto so popular. Then we're going to hop into the interview with Arpit. Thanks for coming and joining us today, Arpit.
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
Glad to be here.
So Arpit was working at Atlan for some time, and so we're going to be covering some interesting setups and deployments they had going on there. Particularly is around the fact that they had a enterprise and a open source version deployed at the same time. So looking forward to that interview. Then for the PR of the week, I am going to be covering pull request 4462. That is covering an addition of headers to the Kafka connector. So now we can actually get the headers in the fields that get returned. So we're going to cover a little bit about that and what that actually means and how it's going to be useful to us. Question of the week is then going to cover the need for Java 11, and some people are a little confused about why we need to have Java 11 and why we made that move. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and then wrap it up. So that's pretty much the show. But first, before we head on to the show, let's do a quick word from our sponsors, Starburst. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Starburst, for hosting this show. Starburst is an enterprise offering that builds upon open source Presto distribution. The main vectors you improve upon when moving to Starburst are performance, support, and simplicity to deploy. The performance gains come from an enterprise suite of Presto connectors that improve upon the open source connectors by offering parallel implementations and improved statistics exposed to the cost-based optimizer. There are also connectors that don't exist in the open source projects, such as the Snowflake connector and Delta Lake connector, and many other that prove useful in many enterprise applications. My favorite thing that Starburst offers is how they take away the pain of deployment, security, and scaling your Presto cluster up by offering Kubernetes deployments on multiple cloud platforms. This relieves a lot of pressure from your ops team and offers them a slick user interface called Mission Control that makes the management of your cross-platform clusters easy. Finally, they have a team of experts that are available to address any issues you experience. This team includes the original founders of Presto, a dedicated customer success team, and even Manfred and myself. We clearly think the product is great, but don't take our word for it. Try Presto for free. Head on over to starburstdata.com to learn more. And now back to the show. Okay, so Manfred, let's hop into release 344. Let me change over. This is not the release notes.
That's okay. So 344, we just came out on the 9th October, so not that long ago, but we already having 345 in line as well. As you can see from the release notes, there's a couple of general changes. I think interesting changes are mostly focused around things like the timestamp support for higher precision. A little bit of things related to the dynamic filtering. So there's a couple of improvements for dynamic filtering, mostly also adding it like it's now fully a part of the SPI, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, cool.
Couple of things on the security aspect. So there's a new file-based group provider, which was interesting. It's not a big kind of like code base, but it has a good effect because you can now do a group provider setup where you configure that in the file based, and there's a couple of other sections in the file-based system access control. And the nice thing is also that all this has changed in the documentation as well. So definitely have a good look at the file-based system access control setup now. There's a lot of things that went in. If you look at the changes, they're all basically coming out of the same issue/pull request. So it's a bit of a large sweeping change that doesn't really break any compatibility, but it just makes it much nicer to work with. Dane has done most of the work on that. It's pretty amazing, so that's good. And then on the Hive connector side of things, mostly performance improvements, a few corrections, but also the hive.security allowing all access, which skips authorization checks, which can have a bit of an impact on performance. And then some other smaller changes.
Oh, cool. We had a little more on the Kafka connector, actually.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Kafka connector we'll talk about later has now predicate pushdown for a couple of columns, which is predicate pushdown is one of those performance improvements where Presto basically lets the underlying system take care of things where it just operates faster. And that is one that went through. So again, that is possible because that predicate pushdown is part of the SPI, which we'll explain later today.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. This is my lack of understanding of the Kafka API, but like, I'm wondering if there's how that gets supported. If that's, I know there's like KSQL DB now, and like this is something that kind of sits on top of Kafka to pull it out. But I'm wondering if this is just probably just using the subscriber kind of API that they have.
I'm honestly not sure, to be honest.
Or streams or something. I know there's like a couple APIs that they have on top of it, so kind of interesting.
I know that the Kafka connector does get regular enhancements, so there must be a whole bunch of people using it.
For sure.
We just like not so long ago like had like insert support added with different formats and stuff like that. So it's definitely also something that always pops up in the release notes. So
yeah, and it's so central to the guts of just about any type of architecture these days. So it makes sense why it's becoming a little more popular. Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
344 and 345 is just around the corner, by the way. So we'll see.
Yeah, I didn't ask you. Are we done with the with the release?
We're
notes?
just doing the last kind of like release note fine tuning and stuff like that. I'm guessing it's gonna hit the road today or tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah, cool. And hopefully, yeah, we'll stay tuned for that. I mean, I'm guessing we'll be covering that and possibly a 346 by the next show in 2 weeks.
Slow down, all right. Let's just stick with 345 for a little bit.
I don't know, man. The way we've just been blazing through all these different releases, so I just wouldn't be surprised. So let's go on to. I wanted you to get another kind of point to kind of, and we may even keep doing this. To talk about your first steps. This is a class that we had you talk about last show, and then we realized later in kind of mid show that we didn't have the audio working, and so we did a better check this time. I'm hoping, and so I haven't heard from anybody on Twitch side that we're not getting any audio going through. Right? So yeah, I just want to have you kind of go through like what is this class about? I think this is actually going to be on O'Reilly. So I pulled up your web account. I think we have both links.
So what this builds upon is obviously Matt, Martin, and myself wrote Presto the Definitive Guide earlier this year that got out in March and has gotten lots of readers because it gives you a good overview of Presto and sort of like handholds you a little bit along the way. And we're giving it away from Starburst for free. So lots of people have taken advantage of that. If you haven't yet, make sure you go to starburstdata.com and get a free copy.
We have O'Reilly that link, by the way. That link will be in the show notes. We put that one in the show notes. So
awesome, cool. So what then happened is that O'Reilly was pretty happy about what's been going on, and I've already in the past done lots of trainings. So when they approached me about doing a training class on Presto, which they then ended up calling Presto First Steps, I jumped on that opportunity. And the first event is happening later this month, next month, like in November, pretty soon. And all you have to have is one of those O'Reilly e-learning subscriptions, which you can even just get for a trial period for free. if you wait a little bit sort of towards the event, but it's also very cheap and offers lots and lots of classes. This specific class will have two aspects. I'll be teaching a lot, showing a lot of things, but also it has 3 Kata Coder examples, which is like an online learning platform where you basically on a live system can run through exercises without, like, you basically kind of get like a Docker container running in a browser for you, like not in the browser, but accessible via browser for you. So I have a couple of examples that like basically teach you to get started with Presto. So the whole class is about finding out what is Presto about, getting to a start where you pretty easily can like write your first queries for it, and you'll know how to get started with it on your own and sort of like work towards maybe a full deployment at your company, and then work understanding larger scale and that kind of thing. So it'll give you a good introduction.
Yeah, just to provide some context, this won't be usable by our podcast listeners, but if you just go to katacoda.com, you can definitely check things out there. There's a this is an example that I have pulled up here right now. And then for podcast listeners, just go to katacoda.com. You can look at a whole bunch of examples. They have like Kubernetes, TensorFlow, all these different, examples and scenarios for you to run through. And you basically can just click on the code, or you can, type it in, and it's a fully like functioning terminal, that you can actually like ls and, just kind of do everything that you would do in a regular terminal, but it's just through your web browser. All of the compute and everything is happening on O'Reilly's and Katacoda's backend. So it's a really powerful tool to kind of learn through some of these things. So especially for now, and we're starting to slowly more and more leverage Katacoda in upcoming things, including what Manfred's done here to kind of convey a lot of these simple, and then eventually we're going to be moving into more advanced topics. So this is cool, really cool. And so you would definitely say, like, is this for like somebody who knows nothing of Presto, or even a little bit?
People who know nothing about it or have heard of it, but like haven't like are a bit scared to like muck around on their own. This lowers the barrier of entry even more, and it's like if you subscribe to the learning platform, you get access to all these other classes, and this is just one of them. So jump onto that. It's in November, and then another one is going to happen late next year in January, and then we'll see how it goes. And if lots of people ping me about it, maybe I'll end up doing an advanced class next.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's where we need to head, because I mean, in the beginning, it's about kind of converting people to understand like what Presto is and where it fits. But then I think, yeah, like beyond that, we'll want to also kind of give some information to those that are intermediate to advanced users, and get them included as well. So very cool stuff. And those links will also be included in the show notes, so definitely check those out. And the show date, by the way, or the training date for this class is November 16th, 2020. So don't forget to sign up. And cool. Anything else you wanted to say, Manfred, before we move on?
No, I think that's good. Related, and also jump over, by the way, is since we're talking about advanced classes, we have a whole bunch of classes that we did recently that you'll also have online.
Yep.
That Martin, Dane, and David presented, where I was hosting, and we're like going through various aspects. And they're all available on the blog in prestosql.io/blog.
Yeah, they're starting to fall down, but if you look, so the last one was on August 27th, configuring and tuning Presto performance with Dane, and you'll see they're prefixed with Presto training series and different sessions. So there's 4 sessions, and so you can kind of just scroll through the blogs, and they'll have the slides, they'll have the videos, and you get to hear Manfred's beautiful voice.
Yeah, right. You're the one that can actually sing.
Cool. Yeah, good point there. So moving on, a couple things I wanted to highlight. We have a Presto newsletter on the Starburst site that you can subscribe to. Just highlight, I highlight a couple of things that I see coming through there on the show as well. So there is a ongoing Postgres conference called PostgresConf. Many of you probably already know about that. And so So we had a couple of our essays talk from some Starburst data, particularly Randy Chertkow. He is covering kind of at a mostly higher level, but he also does kind of show some pretty like lower level kind of configurations that you would do to actually like connect either a JDBC tool or a BI tool to run queries against Presto, and this pre-recorded video or presentation was actually talking to multiple Postgres servers, which makes sense because probably the people attending this conference have a lot of Postgres servers or different various, maybe they distribute their data across various servers and they all use Postgres. So definitely one use case. The other one I wanted to show, let me see when this event is. So that event already happened, and there's going to be a link to that in the show notes. There's going to be let me see. Oh, I seem to have gotten the wrong. Let me see. This is also Randy Chertkow. Unlock data in Postgres and query it with other sources. Okay, yeah, this is the correct one. Let me see what date this is. There's going to be another conference on this, but I thought this had not already happened, and it's no longer showing me the date like it was before. So I will have the link to this. It may have just happened maybe just the day before. So I will see if I can put that into the show notes as well, along with this link. But basically, it was the intent of that second course was to now say, instead of putting Presto on top of like multiple Postgres servers, which adds some value for sure, but you probably have NoSQL databases, you probably have Kafka streaming things in your database that you maybe want to do a federated search query over. So Randy also is going to be covering that aspect as well. And then the final thing that I saw from the that I wanted to kind of show from the Presto newsletter was this Presto meets Elasticsearch connector. This is coming out from Big Data Boutique. They are consultants for Presto, and we've actually done a little bit of. I think we had like one of our essays also talk on on one of their weekly knowledge transfers. I think it's an AMA. It's an Ask Me Anything. So we had, I think this was also Randy and another one of our essays, Austin Zellner. He talked with them a little bit just to kind of, give an overview of Starburst. But yeah, these guys are really interested in kind of, consulting for Presto, and they have this Presto meets Elasticsearch connector. It basically takes what the open source connector did, and then they added a lot of features like there's a lot of features in Elasticsearch around like geo. Like I think there's particularly models of like geotagging data, or also like being able to model particular points and polygons and things like this. And you can then do kind of interesting queries in Elasticsearch for this. I don't know to what extent they've done this. That's what I kind of watched through this a little bit, and it was mostly a recap on Presto for those who didn't know. But at the end, they start showing a couple interesting things that they've enabled in their own personal kind of Elasticsearch connector. So definitely an interesting look into this. And they also aimed to do some performance enhancements as well. So that one I thought was pretty neat. So those will all be in the show notes as well. Events coming up, we still have these Tech Talk summits. So there's one, and I'm going to say the location, but it's not going to matter because they're all digital. So it's probably more about when these are going to happen. So you can, these are all going to be listed in the show notes as well. But one's in Jacksonville, Florida on October 27th, and then the other one's November 19th, and Detroit, Michigan, actually right next door to me. So so these two are. Basically, we're just going to have an essay kind of walk you through Starburst Presto. So if you have little background, I think these will be very useful to go and check out. The final one that I'm very, very excited about in terms of the event is going to be taking place on November 20th, just after the last Tech Talk, and that is going to be the Presto conference in Tokyo. So most of the talks here are going to be given in Japanese, I mean, it's a networking opportunity. I'm sure most of the attendees will speak English if you're interested in kind of going just to network. It will probably be more specific to kind of Asia Pacific folks that are interested in kind of learning more about Presto, especially those that can speak Japanese. But definitely something I wanted to highlight as part of one of the communities that doesn't get quite as much love on the show until now. So I will be looking into possibly giving a very minimal talk in English at this conference. So we'll be looking out for that. So cool. Other than that, as we had already mentioned, make sure you check out the latest trainings from David, Dane, and Martine. It's Advanced SQL and Presto, understanding and tuning the Presto query processing. That one's with Martine, talking about cost-based optimizers. Securing Presto with Dane, and Dane also then talks on a second webinar about configuring and tuning the performance. So that fourth one and the second one kind of go hand in hand to some degree, but definitely all in all trying to kind of, one's more focused on specific queries versus the other one's kind of talking about improving the performance across a cluster. Finally, we have the Presto Summit series that is also available in the same blog locations, also a little further nested down, but this is talking about the state of Presto in 2020. This was slightly outdated now, but still pretty relevant. And then we also have conversations with a couple companies like Zuora, Arm Treasure, and Pinterest about their use cases of Presto. Also in the show notes, we'll be adding a couple recent podcasts. Nothing within the last 2 weeks that is fresh off the press, so I'm not going to really go into those too heavy right now. But yeah, that's basically going to kind of finalize it for what we are going to be talking about in news. So on to the concept of the week, Mr. Moser. And you're on mute. Still not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Good.
All right. Dang it. Hardware failures left, right, and center. All good now, though. All right. So concept of the week. What I wanted to talk about this week is something that affects lots of Presto users and also lots of contributors. And that is what's called the SPI, or Service Provider Interface of Presto. In the documentation, the developer guide, you see this. And that's just a side effect, or sort of like an implementation detail of an like very crucial architectural decision that Martine, Dane, and David and Eric made when they started writing Presto. And what that is they decided to create a platform architect, like a plugin architecture. So Presto basically is like a core runtime framework that basically knows a lot of things in terms of orchestrating queries and all that kind of stuff. But then it relies on plugins to do certain aspects. Those aspects are things such as connecting to an underlying data source, doing some security details, working with specific, like implementing specific functions and types, and getting them to run. And these plugins are basically implementing what's called SPI. So SPI stands for Service Provider Interface. It's basically just a couple of Java interfaces that you have to implement when you write a plugin. And the plugin could be a connector. So every connector, for example, needs to implement how to get the list of tables and the metadata about the tables that are available, or the schemas, to Presto. And Presto just says to the connector X, hello, give me the tables, or a list of tables in that schema, or give me the list of schemas, or give me the data types for that table. And then the connector is the only system that understands how to actually go into that relational database or Elasticsearch or whatever it goes into, and find that information, provide it back to Presto. And then Presto can basically orchestrate and like work with that metadata, and it doesn't really have to care what the underlying system is. So that SPI abstracts those aspects. And so when you want to write a new plugin, a new connector to a new underlying data source, all you need to do is basically implement that service provider interface and the relevant interfaces. And why that is important is you're writing in Java, and when you're doing that, and you need to understand that your SPI, like that you're writing against, is dependent on the Presto release. So if you look at the release notes, I linked
Yep.
for one release notes, the SPI now and then changes. So it's important that whatever plugin you write or whatever data type you write it against the same thing. So in this release note, for example, that we see here, I think 342 or whatever it was, there was a change that added a signature method for dynamic filtering. So now any connector that has potentially some sort of functionality towards dynamic filtering can now implement that, and it automatically takes care of that dynamic filtering method, like the work, and Presto will just push it down and say, hey, you, Mr. Data Source here under the bottom, take care of this. You do the filtering. I don't have to worry about it. And so that's important. And the result of this plugin architecture and the SPIs that you implement there is that you can write your own plugin. So you can write your own connector. You can create an improved version of an open source connector, maybe even contribute it back or specialize it for your use case, whatever it is, right? And you can add more stuff there. And that's how we get contributions also added. Like someone, for example, wrote the authenticator for Salesforce recently was contributed. That's just another plugin that was written. And that's very crucial to the success of Presto, right?
Yep, for sure. I think that's like kind of, I wouldn't say like there's obviously the speed aspect, right? Like the fast kind of pipeline processing, and then there's the query rewriting. That part, like let's not overlook that part. But I think this is really kind of what makes it applicable to so many use cases. So you can definitely, I mean, there's a whole bunch of kind of fast in-memory processing that you can see in many different systems, but I think like it's the merger of the SPI with this kind of incredible fast processing that is done on parallel scales on two levels, kind of parallel across machines and then parallel within an individual machine, and kind of that dynamic type of planning that occurs there, as well as like dynamic code writing, even down to that level. So it's all of those speed up features plus this SPI, like this extensibility, just makes it so applicable to just about any use case that gets thrown at us. So, I mean,
and it unlocks that
yeah,
that powerful engine for lots more use cases. All you have to do is write another plugin, right? And that's great. And that's what lots of people do, right? Like they write like Zuora had their own plugin written. Of course, Starburst does that and improves the system a lot with custom extensions and like additional like Snowflake or Teradata connector, and lots of others do that. Like you mentioned earlier, Big Data Boutique, they're doing the same thing with Elasticsearch. And a lot of those core improvements will benefit everyone, right? Like we contribute a lot to Presto all the time.
Yep.
And everyone benefits, and we work together, and that's great.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's and ultimately too, one thing I wanted to kind of point out too is like a lot of what's happening within these plugins is driving the core engine. So if you have some way to kind of like do a predicate pushdown so that there's less work or less things to be streamed, as well as if you are able to kind of use some statistics about the actual data that's sitting in whatever database source and expose that to the cost-based optimizer, then it can come up with a much more intelligent plan. So that's where I think you kind of start hopping into. You mentioned Starburst, so this made me think of this. Is that these are kind of the enterprise differentiations, and where things change up is that you're kind of taking advantage of things running in parallel, and also kind of taking advantage of exposing various statistics to the cost-based optimizer. So and so these are things that first time around you're usually kind of enabling just for this interaction to work, but then as you gradually kind of develop each of these individual connectors, you're trying to add these kind of features to them, and whether it's Starburst or just getting straight into the open source, I think it's all, like you were saying, it's all good, and we're all making Presto one a little bit better for everyone.
Exactly. And if you're interested in more details, the website's prestosql.io/docs has this developer guide, and that gives you a good overview all the way to diving in and actually writing a plugin. You can look at the existing plugins in the open source code base for examples. And of course, we're all hanging out on Slack and are hopefully ready to help you along as well where necessary. So
Absolutely. Cool. With that, we are now to our interview. So, Arpit, thank you so much for waiting so patiently. And I'd like to, here, let me move our screens back here. There we go. I'd like to say welcome first, and thank you so much for joining us to talk about Presto at Atlin.
Hey Brian, hey Manfred.
Cool. So, I'm just going to kind of jump in and we have a few prompting questions, but hopefully we can just kind of get to more organic type of conversation about this. So, my first kind of prompt question is, what made your team move to Presto, to use Presto in the first place, and was this kind of like replacing an existing kind of problematic or slow setup or previous architecture, and you guys needed something a little faster, or was this like greenfield project, like we're going to set up Presto and just make things run fast?
Okay, so the use cases we had was are majorly two. Okay, first was data processing on scale. Okay, somewhere close to terabytes, hundreds of terabytes of scale. Okay, and second was interactive query use cases, which covered everything from querying directly on the platform to reporting use cases on Excel, Power BI, or Tableau. Okay, these were our two use cases, and this was fresh use case basically. Okay, there was nothing in place. Okay, so for satisfying both of these use cases, we had a couple of options. Like we could go with data processing and something else for interactive queries use case. But then again, it was managing two different frameworks, scaling them and monitoring everything. Okay, so we decided to go with Presto. We didn't consider Hive or Impala kind of frameworks because again, it was either slow or not as many connectors or not a good community or basically abandoned by the developers. Okay. So that's why we chose Presto.
Okay.
So it was very important for you to have a project where there is a community behind it and lots of people are contributing and it looks alive, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So basically, we got to know with Presto DB project. Okay, so we thought that okay, it was backed by Facebook, and like they ran it on scale. They abandoned, like they used Presto over Hives. Okay, so that was a clear choice. But then we got to know about Presto SQL. That okay, there is this project that is driven by community rather than a single company. So that's why I went with Presto SQL.
Awesome. And you ended up trying it out pretty quickly. And how did that go?
Okay, so we tried it on single machine, basically like your standard installing instructions, like install and run, connect with let's say S3 or Azure lakes and like run query or something. It was working fine. Okay, but it would have been too much of hassle to manage a new framework like Presto in starting when we are building the product. So we decided to go with a managed version like Starburst.
And so did you what kind of connectors, I guess, were you guys using before we hop into the whole Starburst part?
Okay, so in starting we had S3 as our major source. Okay, a little bit of data in Postgres and MongoDB as well. Some little bit of transaction and monitoring kind of data.
Okay.
Okay. Then, like in an year or so, we got Delta Lake, we got Snowflake, okay, as connectors as well.
So when you guys had both this Starburst and you had open source Presto running at the same time, was this just to kind of push off was it particularly focused on certain use cases? Like had a use case that had more kind of enterprise needs, like maybe connector, or was it, were you trying to basically just push off any like a set of architecture decisions saying, let's try both of them and just see what works? I'm not sure.
Okay, so we had two problems with running just Starburst Presto. One was cost. Okay. Second was the dependency on a vendor. So in case a client doesn't want to use Starburst Presto, then we would have a problem. Okay. So vendor locking and the cost.
Yeah.
Okay. And we were already running multiple Presto clusters. So we thought that, okay, let's replace one of these with open source Presto.
Okay. And what point did you guys feel comfortable to kind of scale up that Starburst cluster?
Okay, so exact size, or like the size of the clusters increased from close to 100 200 gigabytes to 3 terabytes of RAM. Okay, so there were multiple clusters.
Yeah.
A couple of them were ranging from like 500 GB to 1 terabyte, and some of them were even 3 to 3.5 terabyte.
So it kind of organically grew, and as that growth happened, did you kind of you had a choice to make. You could have stayed growing with kind of OS Presto, or you could stick, kind of start focusing into Starburst. So you guys, I think, chose more for like expanding with Starburst once you got started, right?
I would not say that we expanded in with one of the distributions.
Both.
We had both of the distributions growing organically. So basically, the cases where queries needs to be really fast, like less than a second. Okay. On these cases, we were using Starburst only. So reporting use cases, Excel, Power BI, Tableau, these kind of things. They were using Starburst Presto only. Okay, so that like user doesn't feel like, okay, they are running a query on terabytes of data. They will feel like, okay, it's instant results. Okay. Other than that, everywhere, uh, every use case which was time critical. So let's say if you want result in an hour, okay, it's time critical. You need to present something. Then you use our Starburst cluster. Otherwise, anything that is not time critical, like something that is going to take, if you assume, like let's say it is going to take 1 hour and it takes 1.5 hours. If you have no problem with that, we use star open source cluster.
Okay.
So are you using the same version, like 330 or 3 whatever, of open source or and Starburst, or just mixing it, whatever?
I think the releases were like for Starburst, we were using LTS release, whichever was available, and for open source, we were using 330.
What issues did you encounter when? We'll start with open source, and then I'm curious to hear any issues you found with Starburst. So open source, when you were kind of setting that up, was it on prem or was it cloud for open source?
For Starburst, like for everything, it was on AWS.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So you were using EMR. That's right. That's right. I remember we had a previous conversation about that. So you had EMR for open source.
No, we were not using EMR for open source because EMR was providing PrestoDB, and
That's right.
we didn't want to use that. And we found like people complaining about EMR for Presto, like it was not running well, or it
Got
was shutting down workers intermittently, or like anytime. Okay, so
Okay.
for these kind of cases, we prefer that, okay, we'll create our own deployment of open source Presto.
So you guys actually managed an entire open source Presto SQL deployment out on some EC2 clusters?
Yes.
Whoa. That's hardcore.
That's
Okay,
good.
so yeah, so it was exactly like inspired from your Starburst deployment. So basically, your architecture has two master nodes,
Yeah.
and they can be switched whichever is alive. Okay, and there is an auto scaling group of workers running, which are connected to your live Presto master node. Okay, so this was exactly our setup. Okay, and for running it in a auto scaling group, we were using a Lambda to actually shut down the Presto workers.
Whoa. So, okay. So, and what was that experience like? Like, did you guys have to run up against a couple walls? Like, how many? How in term? Let's just go with like we'll go with wall clock. Like, how many months did this take to get this deployment off the ground, or years?
Not
No, years.
months. You'll be surprised. Like it took around 1 month to figure out all of this deployment, creating it in CloudFormation. Okay,
Okay.
and 15 days something to actually know that okay, this is not working or this is not working or we
Yeah.
cannot track this kind of thing.
How big is your engineering department? That's another question that comes to mind with this.
It barely qualifies as a plural, so it was around 4 or 5 people max.
Wow. So 4 or 5 people was able that you guys must have been running some late nights, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes.
Okay. So you guys were able to get this deployment, this OS Presto deployment up in AWS on EC2. You had a failover, um, and you then started kind of you were basically running with a small amount of kind of initial use cases with Presto. Now let's move over to Starburst. And what was your experience like there in terms of kind of the deployment and these aspects?
I would say with everything, Starburst was really smooth. Okay, not any problems. Okay, but some of the things which are missing from both Starburst and open source, like if you remember, there used to be a reserved pool in the pools of memory. Okay, so at that time, I think there was no option to remove the reserved pool. So the problems we saw at that time was like, okay, we are running 1 terabyte size of cluster and only 300 GB memory is available to
Hmm.
all the queries, and other 700 is available to only one query. So that was kind of becoming a problem. But then I think the release for removing this thing came at the same time. So we removed that, and I think after that, Starburst was fine. Okay,
Okay.
in terms of execution. One problem that we saw was lack of monitoring infrastructure.
Hmm.
So basically, if I want to monitor, let's say memory, CPU, how many queries, how many are failing, okay, these types of things, this is present in Starburst, but not in open source.
Yeah.
Okay, so like there is no native integration to, let's say, Prometheus, or let's say query statistic, persisting the query statistics, or what query came, what was the plan of it, these kind of things.
Yeah. That did that kind of inform a lot of, as you were scaling, because you were saying you guys quickly saw some organic growth once this started to take off. And so once that happened, I'm sure this was pretty nice to have, I guess, just in terms of cycling through, because you're not really sure when you first go in on any kind of new architecture that you're testing out how much you really need. And if you take Dane's advice, he just says use way more than you think you're going to need. But that's hard to know, especially for a small startup like you guys had. And so I think like this is where you have to have tools like that to kind of give you that insight to, okay, we're starting to see some failure here. This is is this a first you can use the ability to go through and determine like, is this an issue just with the software somehow or some way that we've set it up. But once you kind of pull it out, most of the time it's just we're running out of memory. We need to scale up, and so yeah, I think having those it must have been a good help. So good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Like on sizing thing, uh, like I think we found out what how much to size. Okay, like what size of nodes to put after 7 to 8 months into using the Starburst Presto. So I read, I think on you guys Slack, okay, your Slack that okay, this you need to use bigger nodes
Hmm.
for optimal performance. I think that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, and one feature that I feel is missing, okay, where you won't have to worry about sizing is like Presto doesn't um, use dynamic number of workers for a query. So basically, whenever a query hits, it will freeze the number of workers and it will send the tasks to only that worker, those workers for a query.
Mhm.
So that becomes a problem if you have a very skewed size of data for different queries. Let's say someone is sending 100 terabyte of data, someone is sending just 1 terabyte of data.
Yeah.
How do you manage? Let's say someday the data is increased 50% and the query failed.
That's the classic problem, man.
Yeah.
I mean, one of those things like you kind of have to go back and forth between. I mean, if you have an unlimited number of resources, then you're fine, but that's
Hmm.
usually not the case. And if so, if you go to your manager and you ask, "Hey, I need this huge, amount of space," and you're barely using those resources, then when it comes to the one, like maybe a few times out of the day, or that you just get super unlucky where one of these queries come back and this one query just is this giant marble of a query that just hogs up your whole system. How do you kind of manage not starving out everything else and scaling that up? And the easy answer, which any bigger company will tell you, just throw more nodes at it.
Well, actually, I want to kind of like semi disagree about that.
Okay.
Because that's the easy answer. But even at large companies, that's not really often the answer. Like many times, like say you're like some large like TV network that has to run some sports website or so, or whatever, or like a large commercial entity that does online sales. They have like they can't just say, well, we'll throw a lot of hardware at it and be ready for Black Friday or be ready for this big Super Bowl event or whatever. They have to like they know upfront when that event is and they prepare beforehand. I think to some degree there is this like fine balance that you have to find between your system being able to automatically scale when the load comes in, but you also on the business side of things have to capture that knowledge that there will be a big event and you have to preemptively get these things up and running and make the capacity available. And it's just a fine balance. And I think the answer, like there is no magic solution really. It has to be both aspects a little bit.
So it depends is the answer.
Yeah, it is. Like
That's like the cornerstone of being like any type of engineer is like you just got to be able to say it depends.
when the rubber meets the road,
It
it
depends.
depends.
So, but yeah, no, it's a fair point, Pete, and I definitely think like I think we get those questions pretty frequently in Slack. I see them in the dev channels all the time. Like,
Yeah.
how do we know how much to have on there? Well, it depends, right? And it depends on the best ways. I think like you just need to have a couple seasoned engineers that have seen this stuff before that know how to anticipate when things are going to scale up. First, how to set up your architecture in a way that will be able to kind of detect when things are getting to a higher watermark, and be able to say, hey, like this is either a kind of a like the one burst kind of thing, or this is going to be one of those more frequently occurring things, and so how do you kind of scale that up as needed, and so yeah, so it's gonna kind of take, I think, just expertise and unfortunately just kind of have that pattern detection when
A
things
little
are
bit.
about to go
A little
wrong.
bit at least.
So
Yeah.
very
Like
cool stuff. Arpit, did you have anything you wanted to finalize, like say as a kind of last remarks or anything like that, or Manfred? Actually, first let me ask Manfred. Manfred, do you have anything you wanted to ask before we close out the interview?
No, I think I got all my questions answered. It's pretty interesting, and it's good to see that you can like run again. multiple, even on a smaller company, right?
Yeah.
Multiple clusters, different use cases, different things, and we can manage with a relatively small team, which is good to know, right?
Oh yeah. Pete, did you have any closing remarks that you wanted to make?
Yeah, so I want to say that after working with a lot of technologies in this space, okay, um, like one of the most popular ones, Spark, okay, if you're not doing this on a managed platform like EMR, uh, it's very hard for other technologies. With Presto, I found out that okay, some of the pieces were missing, like okay, monitoring infrastructure you need to set up, but if you set everything up once, it pretty much runs smoothly. Like you don't have to go to every day and look at a dashboard or receive alerts in the night that this is failing, this is failing, this is failing.
So you're
So
saying it's
oh,
simpler than Hadoop.
yes, overall, yes, Hadoop's ecosystem is pretty harder to manage compared to Presto.
For sure.
That's good. Excellent.
I guess I was trying to be funny, but cool. Well, thank you very much for joining the show today, Arpit. Yeah, I mean, really glad to have you, and I'm glad to have you as part of the community now. So, so we look forward to talking with you, and then and hopefully the next time you get your hands on more Presto use cases, let us know, and then we may have to have you back on the show. So stick around if you want to, in case we get another question, and unless you have to go, and then we'll be moving on to the next part of the show. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Pete.
you.
So okay, so with that, we're going to be moving on to the pull request of the week. So this pull request, let's change over. Gonna go into a little bit of code scene. Actually, I do want to pull up the actual pull request. And I got into contact with the developer that set this up for us, or that did the contributor that did this. His name is Sven. Okay, let's see if I can do the right German pronunciation. Sven Pfennig. Is that
Close enough? Sven Finn. Okay, so I'm Austrian, so I have to apologize. I don't have the as much down as a proper Northern German, like Hochdeutsch speaking person. But
Yeah, help
I would
me.
say Sven Pfennig. And by the way, Pfennig is just like the little coins, like cent, basically. Before we had the euro, there was the Deutschmark or like the German mark as a
Okay.
coin, and the smaller one was Pfennig.
Okay, so it's kind of a equivalent to a penny. Can we say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, Sven. This is his GitHub. I actually don't know what this binary means, but it must mean something. Maybe it's Sven in hex, but probably not. So anyways, he added this pull request, and I think it's a very simple to understand pull request. For those that are on the podcast, check this out. It's 4462. It's he adds Kafka headers to as one of the columns that we get back from Kafka. So I think this has a lot of actual application usage, and it's such a simple addition. I'm not going to say it's too simple, but it's just a couple changes in about 7 files that he made here, and I think it adds so much value. So when at my last company, we used Kafka, and so there's a lot of times where you will have Kafka and kind of either maybe some binary blob encrypted, or I mean, some people kind of throw Kafka messages around in plain text, and there's maybe compression. So usually these messages typically have a little bit of processing that you would have to do in order before you could actually just read fields in them. So what's nice about these headers, you can think about the headers kind of similar to like you would like an HTTP type header, where it's just a list of kind of key value pairs that go along with this Kafka message. And it makes it really simple if you're trying to kind of, let's say, route this message somewhere, or in the Presto context, I think it could be really useful for a join. So if if you want to delay the actual processing of this message, and you want to kind of maybe do a join on maybe some sort of tag, you can stick that maybe in the header. and do a little very minimal amount of processing, and actually pull out this let's say this tag, call it foo. You're interested in joining on this foo column, and so you pull that out, and then you can kind of basically say where foo equals this header value name or something like that. So it could be a pretty powerful thing in Presto, just to simply add this header thing. So I went ahead. This is
So
gonna,
hang on.
oh.
Just a question then. So you basically, that header is kind of like, can be a container for a bit of metadata in a way, right?
Say again.
The header can be kind of a container for a little bit of metadata
Yeah.
that allows you to like pick up some data about the message itself without having to pull out the message and parse it. So when whatever system sends something into the stream, can basically add a bit of metadata in it, so which allows you to consume it or like set up the consumption a bit easier, or in our case with Presto, pull it out.
Right.
So,
Quick thing. Actually, so I just saw Sven's on our Twitch chat right now. He said my hex name is the UTF-8 representation of the Unicode character for the German penny sign.
oh, cool.
So very, very cool. Very meta, Sven.
Truly a geek. Well done, Sven.
Nice. Okay, so back to Kafka. I think when you take this header, you can let's say you have a system that's pushing these that's actually generating these messages, and you can maybe like either have their message itself that becomes the value of this one of these key value pairs that you're wanting to use, or you could even like, it may not even be a field that exists in the actual message itself. It could be some extra processing you did. So let's say you have like a customer ID and that maps to some other type of customer ID in another database. So you could even do like a quick lookup and say, hey, this is the actual customer ID in this remote database that I actually want to do a join on. So there's kind of a lot of things that you could do with this type of setup. So let me see if I can. I'm gonna forget how to do that. There we go. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Let me do clean. So or clear, not clean. Dismiss. So I'm gonna do a quick. And do my best to help the people that are listening to this on the podcast. I'm going to do a very quick demo. And what we're going to do is we're going to send a couple events on a Kafka topic. So we set up a Kafka topic. Let me first create this Kafka topic called PCB. So we're gonna. I already have a Kafka broker already set up. So let's hope that, okay. So we created this topic PCB on the Kafka broker, and for those that aren't familiar with Kafka, it's just literally the server that you're talking to kind of pass these messages around. And if you're not familiar with Kafka at all, there is going to be a couple links in the show notes that will give you a quick start of Kafka, just to give you some context on this. But anyways, we have this topic called PCB, and this is basically just a queue that we're going to be sending a couple messages to. So on this queue, I'm going to use this tool called Kafka Cat, and it basically just takes in the standard input of some event. So I put Manfred 1, Brian 2 as the message, and then for the header we're just going to put foo as the key and bar as the value. So and then I have a parsing error. Great. Is that just a, let me see if that might have been, here, let me just remove this out of there actually. There we go. It was just some goofy thing. So we have Manfred on one, and here, let me actually do this. So then we'll do another one where we'll just set Brian 2, and then we'll send it. So that's the message, and then we're going to do foo equals Baz in this one. So now what we would need to do is in our Kafka configuration, let me see if I can.
You're going to have to make that a bit bigger, Brian. So just.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Let me make that bigger first. and we'll do a clear on this one. This is all the old examples that I was working on before. So let's go, let's see. We want to go, oops. We want to go into, not that Etsy, this Etsy. And we want to go into the, where am I going? Catalog. So we want to go into the, I'm already there, Kafka. We want to go into the Etsy catalog Kafka properties. And in here, we have just the connector name, which is Kafka. We have Kafka table names. And right now I have one that's just up for test for a previous one that I was doing. And we just want to add the topic here, PCB, which is the topic that we created just now and submitted those messages to. And then I point to the broker, which is just pointing to my local host from Docker. And then I also want to not hide the internal columns, which is this header stuff. So those are the only, basically that's the only Kafka properties that we actually have to set up for this. And then we can just start up Docker. So this is actually going to start up.
He's just starting a Presto.
Starting a Presto, yeah. And then log into Presto. And then from here.
Going in with the CLI there, or yeah?
Yeah, got to go into the CLI. And then from here, we're now going to, let's do a quick show catalogs. And catalogs is going to probably show us a min.io as well, but we should expect to see Kafka. Still initializing.
You lost an O.
And I lost an O, so that would have been failed anyways. Here. So give me a minute here. The Docker is still, or basically the Docker image is still going up. There we go. So we have Kafka as one of the catalogs. We're going to basically just be pulling from the default. So if we just do a select all apparently I cut off the stream on accident whenever I was typing the Shift R because I made that the hotkey in my OBS to do recording. This cut out at this point of this point where I did the capital R here for the from. So I want to run these real fast one more time. So we'll run the PCB, basically the select all from Kafka, which is the catalog that we're pulling from. Default is just going to be, since we didn't set up a particular schema, it's going to use default in this case. And then in our configuration, we added the PCB topic. So what we're going to expect when we pull these out is now we actually see, lo and behold, the headers that Sven had added. So this is actually going to be a map of that has the key of kind of a plain text key, and then an array of binary values. And this is just an array of bytes in Kafka. So that actually is what ends up coming out of these this pull request. And this is pretty useful when you're looking at these scenarios where let's say this message is encrypted, or it is it's compressed, or it's just in some various binary format. You don't want to have to spend all this extra cycles pulling all these messages apart to maybe find a field that you're trying to kind of do a join on. Instead, what you can do is you can use these headers to kind of maybe join with another table, so an external table outside of Kafka, maybe say with your Hive store, and this is going to could be something like a customer ID, right? And so you, or could even be Manfred on the previous time that we recorded. You brought up a good example of what if you were wanting to only focus on a certain region based on what's coming out of your Kafka stream. So you could do this query, and from these headers you find, well, the regions that we care about are all coming from, basically Great Britain or something like that. Exactly. So we want to focus on that region when we do this join in Presto. So this can be super powerful depending on how you kind of leverage this. And so that was what we kind of wanted to show when we pulled out of this. So I pulled this very specific I guess crazy, you can say crazy select statement that actually decodes in SQL decodes these elements, and so you see the messages that we sent before on Kafka, Manfred 1:1 and Brian :2. When we query this using Presto, we now see the bytes that basically got converted into strings, and you could actually then use this within your Presto query to join this with another data set. So it is very, very powerful, and I will include this select statement so that people on the podcast can understand it. But at a basic idea is you get this array of bytes, and we run this we send this into a reduce and pull out all the individual characters, and then we basically just return the from these characters we return each individual character converted to UTF. So and then depending on your requirements might need another function like that, but that's the basic idea. You can get these values and then use this within a join. So hopefully, unfortunately, we missed the original recording of this due to my hotkey failure there, but wanted to come in and finish this part of the recording. We're gonna end up doing the question of the week that we initially had since we were running over time anyways. And with that, did you have anything you wanted to kind of bring up or add, Manfred?
No, I think it's good, and it's just another example of some of the Presto SQL functions being very powerful. In this case, converting an array of characters back to how Kafka encoded it, decoding it. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. And another thing you brought up on the previous time was kind of bringing up that Sven is a contributor from Germany. We had just now
our
on,
Pete was here from India, right?
Yeah.
Like we have a whole bunch of people working in Poland with us. We mentioned the Tokyo conference earlier today. So Presto is really an amazing community, and I love that aspect of it, that we literally have people all around the world working on the project, using it and contributing back and helping making it better for everyone.
for
And we
sure.
are just part of that community, and we love that. That's cool.
Yeah, it really is great. That's one of the kind of the cool things about working at Starburst is like you do get to kind of get exposed to a lot of these people, and so from all over the globe. It's something I missed from my military days.
Really big.
So if you have a question, submit it to either go to prestosql.io /Slack and then find us on the channel hashtag presto-community-broadcast. You can submit your PRs there if you want us to feature one of your PRs, like we did for Sven's today. And then otherwise, if you have a question or anything, we'd like to hear from you. The music for today's show is from the Mega Man 6 gameplay album from Krzysztof Slawikowski. And if you want to find Manfred or myself, Manfred's Twitter handle is at Simple Agility on Twitter, and I am at Bits on DataDev. Remember, for fast data at Resto, Presto is the besto.
All right,
Thank you.
cool. Virtual high five.